But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Branch, for having me. We're going to talk about product-led growth. Love to hear that in the previous session. A little bit about me. Started my journey on Earth in South Africa. Since then, I have lived in a lot of different places, including now Dublin, Ireland. Along the way, I became a user of Strava and then eventually started working at Strava a long time ago. I love product-led growth. You're going to hear a lot about that today. And if I'm not working, I'm probably running or cooking. Those two are hobbies that are very combined. Or traveling, where I get to run and eat in a different country. So today I'm talking to you about what I like to refer to as the mobile growth machine, which is really just allowing your users to help you grow by letting them share content externally. In very simple terms, that just means content out, users back in. And because we are all into growth, we love growth loops. So I have a growth loop for you here. You've probably seen something like this before. It's very simple. We want to get content shared externally from your users. That content should be interesting to some degree and result in users clicking on it or non-users clicking on it. And then you want to guide users back into your app or non-users into your app for the first time. And then ideally, those users who are coming back into your product or signing up for the first time become engaged, love your product, and then they too start to share content externally. And there is that flywheel loop. So my presentation today is going to be categorized by these three different steps. We'll spend most of the time talking about how to get your users sharing a lot of links externally, because this is a volume game. And I also think it's just really interesting. So we'll start with the external content sharing piece. And the goal of this is really to expand your product surface and give your users a really fun feature to use. So I like to think of really there's three different goals when it comes to content sharing. First, you want to expand your product surface. Secondly, you want to leverage your most engaged users as referrers to your product. And third, you really just want to create a fun, sticky feature that your users will love to use. So one of the biggest constraints about your product is only people in your product are using your product. So ideally, you find some way of getting more people to see and engage your product. Now, you can do this with comms channels, but you still need to know about your user. External sharing is a great way to allow your users to blow up your product and share it all over the world. It's a great way to really expand your product surface. It's great for feature education and product education for people that haven't used your product before, or to remind people about your product and feature set and bring them back. Often, I'm sitting around or looking on Reddit, or I'm looking on Instagram, and people have shared Strava in all these different places. Or I'm reading an article, and I see Strava art published somewhere different. And it's pretty cool to see Strava being presented to the world by our users, expanding the product surface. It's also a great way of leveraging your most engaged users as referrers. So you can really think, and we'll get more into this later, about social sharing and external sharing as invite loops to a broader audience. And then lastly, users can just often really love to use sharing. People want to tell their story across many different platforms and services. And external sharing is a great way to do that. Our activity sharing feature at Strava is used by about 8% of a MAU, which is really solid for a feature that's not a core feature in the Strava set. And not only that, but those users come back over and over and over again, and they're our most engaged users, so they're sharing multiple times in a month. So this is a great feature that they love to use, and we love them using it because it expands our product surface and gets a lot of content out there in the wild. There are three types of sharing that is important to categorize, and I think it's important to categorize because they might all have slightly different reasons for optimization. The first is just typical content sharing. Hey, I read this article in the New York Times, or I listened to this song, I want to share it with a friend. Now, the purpose of this is literally to get that person to click on that link and come back to your product. You're sharing something specific. This is pretty classic, typical content sharing and very valuable, and I'm sure a lot of you have this. The second is referrals. The second is referrals and invites. So a lot of apps, like your own probably, have this. You're trying to get users to incentivize them to invite other people. The problem with this is the volume is typically pretty low, and it's not a recurring action. So while this can be very valuable and the conversion really high, the volume is really low. People might invite once and never again. Still important to do, but we don't spend a lot of time on the specific invite funnels because of these reasons. The last is something I refer to as the brag or dead-end sharing. This is sharing without really trying to get someone to click in, but just saying, hey, look what I did. Spotify Wrapped is a great example of this. You probably all were reminded of your Spotify Wrapped experience because someone shared theirs in a WhatsApp group and a Slack channel, and then you went into the app to go generate yours. No one was trying to click on my Spotify Wrapped to see any more information, right? They saw Taylor Swift, shout out to Taylor Swift fans out there, and we're like, okay, cool, no more questions, Jason. Same with our Spotify year in review, Strava's year in review. It's a great way to brag and to show folks what you've done, but fundamentally, people will come back to the product to generate their own. So it's not as much of a loop like content sharing, but it's still really, really valuable. And I'd be remiss to talk about sharing without, I think, the best sharing success of the last 2 years, which is Wordle. Wordle is a simple game. There are a lot of simple, fun games out there that are really fun to do. And I really think all of Wordle's success came from their sharing loop. As soon as you're done, you click the simple share button and you share it to some group. I have a group that's been doing it for almost 2 years running now since the beginning, every single day. And I would forget if my friends didn't wake up and do their Wordle and send it to the group. I think it's just brilliant because without that piece, there wouldn't be that natural flywheel of seeing this every day and being like, oh, Wordle, let me go do it. It's also great for new people because there's only one word there, Wordle. All you have to do is Google Wordle, and boom, you're playing the game instantly. And I think this probably took development a few hours to build, and boom, made their product go viral. So at this point, you're maybe saying, all right, Jason, I get it, I'm into it, we're gonna make more things shareable on our app. How do we do this? Well, 3 things you should be thinking about. What is your core feature? Like, what is your app all about, your product all about? Make that shareable. It's a pretty simple idea. 2, what are users already screenshotting? If you go to Instagram or Reddit or just Google, what are people screenshotting and sharing? That says a lot about a user's behavior, of what they want to share with the world. So when we really were looking at investing more into sharing a few years ago, we just went to a bunch of these platforms, saw a lot of people sharing, and said, okay, great, we'll make that more shareable. And then 2, what does the referral funnel look like? So I'll go into these a little bit more. For one, the activity is the core of Strava. People come to Strava to upload, record an activity. So it's pretty simple to think about making that shareable. We have 8.5 billion activities uploaded to Strava. So by making those shareable, we have made it really easy for users to share at a very high volume. We also looked at and allow for people to share aggregates of activities, more insights, and that has been very valuable. But you should A/B test this. You should figure out what might be interesting. I spent about 6 months making literally everything on our app shareable. We tried every graph, every insight, everything. We made it shareable. We took screenshots. We made graphs. It was really fun, and most of them didn't work, but some of them did. But it was really interesting to see where users wanted to share and wanted to express themselves in certain ways and where there wasn't as much traction. At the end, some of these remained in the product, but for the most part, we realized that the volume of our 8.5 billion activities was so high that we would rather just focus on making that a more sticky and engaging experience than moving on. And as I said, are users screenshotting your product? Do a simple search. See what people are saying about your product in different areas. Here, these 2 very recent examples, and they mostly are sharing their activity map, which is what we make shareable. Google and Apple actually make it easy to listen for screenshots in your app. So you can even do something like if someone screenshots, you can put up a modal that says, hey, would you rather use our sharing feature instead? And then lastly, get creative with your referral flows. So as I said, direct invites for Strava, we don't really invest a whole lot there, given the low volume. But we had this insight a few years ago that we got from user research as well as users writing into our support forums. And they said, hey, I'm often on a ride or a run with my friend, and I'm on Strava, but they're not. Wouldn't it be great if I could send my activity to them? And we were like, oh, that's amazing. So what we did, and you can read more about this by going to that link, is we made it so it's super easy using a branch link to literally send your activity to someone who's not on Strava, so that when they sign up from that link, they are given a personalized experience and they have their first activity already in their profile, which is incredible because that's literally what we try to do, is get new users to sign up and record. So these users are getting their first activity immediately, seeing that magic of Strava really quickly. So get creative with how this might look. And again, we are capturing an existing user behavior or desire rather than trying to create a new one. And that is really, really valuable. And this really gets to the crux of sharing, and I think the most important piece, which is how are you linking back to your product? And so now we're on to the second part of the funnel of the growth loop, which is getting potential and existing users to engage with your content. So we want to drive engagement with these links, with these shares, by revealing some of the magic of your product, but not all of it. You want to leave enough behind the curtain so that people are incentivized to click. So there are two types of shared contents. There's links, which we love because we're at a branch conference, and there are branded shares. So first are links, and I think these are awesome. You have three pieces of real estate here. You have a title, a description, and an image. And the image is that preview image that you can do so much with. We personalize every share to the stats of someone sharing that activity. You can customize this however you want. You can A/B test this. You can do so much with it. It's pretty incredible. And again, the goal here is not to tell the full story. It's to get someone to click and to go through. And of course, for an existing user, link sharing is amazing because you click on that piece of content and bam, you're back into the product where you want to be. And for a new user, you can start to create really fun journeys, either on web or mobile, guiding that new user in a personalized experience. But we're in the world of TikTok and Snap, and branded shares are becoming a lot more popular, where you're sharing just an image. And you see a lot of this of wanting to share, sharing an image with at least your branding on it so that users kind of see that and see that a lot and start to get more familiar. It's, the reality of where we're at is not all these platforms want us to share links because they want users to stay there. But I think they're catching on because you see on Snap Lens, which we just recently came out with an integration with Snap, and on Instagram Stories, they are allowing links from those experiences back into your product. I think they realize that it's really important for them to close that growth loop so that companies like us are incentivized to encourage users to share their stories across multiple platforms. So if you aren't utilizing these two features of linking back, you should. It's not the biggest volume or the best bang for your buck, but it's very easy implementation, and I think it is a nice user experience, and we do see users coming back in because of that. So the last step of the growth loop is users returning to your product and hopefully new users signing up. And I'm going to focus here on converting new users to sign up, so visitors to sign up. I think this is like, when we talk about product-led growth, this is where the magic becomes, using your product to really drive your top-of-the-funnel acquisition. So we'll talk about this for quite a bit. All right, so you want to really think about kind of three things when you're thinking about your new user experience. One, where do you take those users when they click on the link? And I'll go through some examples of what we've done at Strava and learned. Two, you want to think of your sharing loops as invite loops. I kind of said that earlier, and I'll talk you through why that's important. And then lastly, personalizing your user experience. Now, for all of you non-engineers in the room, everything I'm about to show you seems fancy and magical, but it's actually very easy to build. None of this is very costly. And we've done so much of this with Strava without a lot of engineering staffing or resources invested in it. And so don't just automatically think, oh, Strava has this magical experience, we can't build it. It's really just a decision of, do you try? So first of all, there's kind of two ways we think about where to send non-users when they click on links. For the most part, if there's a direct invite, we send non-users to the App Store to download immediately. And anything else, we take you to a web page. Now, this might be different for your product, and actually one of the breakout groups I was in, we talked about this at length on where do you see the kind of conversion drop-offs here. And we've learned over time that really you want to take users to an intermediate web page first. And we'll kind of go through some of these examples. So for any activity link that is shared, if you have the app, you will click on the link and go straight into the app and to that page specifically. But if you don't have the app, you will go to an intermediate web page that looks like this. Now, this page has been optimized a lot. We've done a lot of tests on it. There's probably a lot better we can do. We haven't touched it in a while. But then on this page is where we incentivize a user to sign up. There are branch links and buttons all down the page, so we can see where users are clicking and signing up. We can see, are you signing up, clicking on the follow button or the smart banner at the top. But for the most part, we're starting to tell a user a little bit more about what they might see. And usually this is really important. I think it's easy when you're building a product to assume that people know about your product and your feature set. And the shared link is the last straw, and they're like, okay, fine, I'll sign up. But a lot of users don't have any idea what you're talking about or what your product is. And so it helps to slow down and actually add a step in the process to explain to the user what they might see. It's also a great measurement step to kind of add more tracking in the middle. We did these tests last year where we worked with a lot of famous athletes at the Ultra Trail Mont Blanc to talk about their experience at the race on their Instagram stories. And one of the things we found was when these links were sending users straight to the App Store, we were getting tons of clicks on those links, and these are branch links in Instagram stories, but very low install rate. And that was something we discovered was like, okay, there's a lot of interest there, but as soon as they hit the App Store, users are like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. And so one of the next steps we have now is to create an intermediate web page that we can kind of optimize and figure out exactly what a user might want to see before making a decision to download the app. And if you think about it, this makes sense. These links don't say, go download Strava, because if they did, probably fewer people would click on them. They're saying, follow me, right? And people are clicking this saying, okay, what's behind this curtain? So I think it makes a lot of sense that you don't want to just send someone to the App Store. So when I say treating sharing loops as invite loops, this is something I think has been really valuable for us. So here you see what we call a segment challenge, which segments on Strava are short pieces of a route or a road that people compete on. So you can kind of the hill behind in your neighborhood, there might be a segment there, and people will compete to see who can run or bike up it fastest. And so we have this sharing feature, which is just challenge someone on this segment. Now, it kind of seems like a normal sharing loop, but we treat that as an invite. So when you click this link, you see on the welcome screen when you download the app, hey, Jason is asking you to come to the product. Jason is asking you to sign up and compete with him. And again, this was very easy to build and pretty powerful for us because immediately upon opening our app, you are seeing a personalized, customized experience that was based on a share, but really should feel like an invite. And we see this in our data. The best converting kind of sharing platforms, sharing destination platforms, is WhatsApp. WhatsApp converts much better than like a Facebook. Makes sense. I'm sharing with my friend directly and saying, hey, sign up, here's my activity. They're seeing that as an invite. So treat it like an invite. Treat that experience like an invite. It can be very, very powerful. And then we use that deep link and defer it as well into the product. So after signing up, a user will be landing on the segment page and get a special message that says, hey, do this segment with Jason, try it out, compete with him. Again, it's very simple. It's really just copy optimization, copy personalization based on data that you've put it within, in this branch link. But the experience and the outcome that we see is very powerful. Lastly is just personalizing your experience based on these invite links. We do something where we show the inviters information on the welcome screen, and then one of the first screens in onboarding, we say, hey, why don't you follow your inviter? These are all simple, pretty logical things to do, but they can have a huge impact on a user's experience. So I know some of you are probably thinking, all right, Jason, this is great, but you're Strava, like you have a product that's social, that has a lot of user-generated content. If you're starting from scratch, like what do you do? How do you get started? And one of the things we do right now a lot of is kind of amplifying our user-generated content by not just using user-generated content, actually generating that content as well. And there's two examples I'll go through. And it's really about kind of kickstarting the amount of content you have out in the wild. The first is embeds on Press. So a lot of the times, someone will do something remarkable somewhere in the world that they track on Strava, whether it's climbing out Mount Everest without oxygen, or winning a gold medal, or doing some crazy Strava art in their neighborhood because they're bored and do that kind of stuff. People would talk about this a lot, and they would have to screenshot the map and put it into their press articles, which isn't great. So we invested in making a much better embed experience, which is basically just JavaScript and HTML that press now use when they're talking about different Strava activities. And this, again, has branch links in it and drives traffic back to our product. So it's a great way to just kickstart that happening. So if you have a product that you are finding yourselves a lot in the press, this might be something that's very interesting. Like basically provide those newspapers, those press sites, content to send back to your product. The second is build and leverage influencer programs. And this has been really powerful for us, is we have a great network of professional athletes, but lately we've been really working with influencers and more lifestyle athletes in telling their story. So one of the problems with kind of the big pro network for us is that their followers are already on Strava. So it's not a great source for us for new reg. But there are a lot of people who are doing their first marathon for the first time, or doing couch to 5K, or had just had a baby and they're getting into sport for the first time. They're very interesting, compelling stories. And we're finding a lot of these folks and giving them material to share on different platforms and allowing them to bring users back into the product. So if you don't have a lot of UGC, you can kind of rely on these folks and build these networks to drive the content out that will result in users coming back in. So I guess the last question is, does it work? I love numbers. So I'm going to give you some numbers. They're not the most complete numbers because I can't do that. I'd like to keep my job. But hopefully this compels you and makes it kind of interesting and worth doing. The first is we get several million activity shares a month, which is pretty awesome. Like we get a lot of people using these features to just tell their story, right? They're not sitting there being like, let me help Strava. They just want to tell their story, and we're allowing them to do that. About 5% of our monthly actives are actually coming back to the product through clicking on activity links out there in the wild. Now, I say non-incremental because I'm very much a data person, and I think it's very important to state whether the number is incremental or non-incremental. It's kind of hard to measure the incrementality here, but 5% of users coming back into the product is pretty awesome just from this one feature. And then if we look at a lot of our different kind of UGC sharing, we see about 5% of our registrations coming from these links. And that's for us, that's really powerful because that's compounding interest that is free. We're not paying for it. We don't even have to do anything more to get more 5% more next month, right? Obviously, over time, those numbers will kind of go down if you don't keep investing. But this is pretty cool for us, and something that honestly I don't think we've invested in enough over the last few months and years. And so something I want to spend more time investing in.